All right, so I'm going to respond to a comment that keeps popping up. It's the idea that the artwork the church has used in its teaching efforts and its missionary efforts is just an artist's rendition. Now, this is a tactic, this is a form of gaslighting, and what it is pushing responsibility away from the leaders down to the members. So, this is the story behind church art. The church commissions it or approves it, and the artists draw it, and then it's approved and it's used as church art. So people say, well, it's not official church art. Well, what would be official church art if funding and approving art doesn't make it official? Am I supposed to believe that it would only be official if the prophet took up painting lessons and then painted it? It brings up the question, well, why would the artists draw it that way? Well, in one route, let's assume the church is commissioning art. And so they have a conversation with the artist and then pay him and he draws it. Well, in that case, they clearly gave deceiving information to the artist. I mean, it'd be one thing saying, hey, draw a picture of Joseph translating the Book of Mormon by putting his head into a white hat with a rock. And if they said that and then they came back with Joseph looking at plates or using spectacles with plates, physically touching the plates, then the artist would be at fault. So the other way would be that an artist of their free will and leisure, they drew some church paintings, and then the church comes along after and says, hey, we want to use that. Well, one, it's the church who decided to use that. That's church approved. And two, that would just show that church members are confused about the way the Book of Mormon was translated or channeled. I mean, if somebody's going to spend that amount of time drawing something that didn't happen, they were clearly confused about history. And artwork weighs heavier in the mind than words. A picture is worth 1,000 words. So the other argument on this is that, well, it's not really important. Somebody was mentioning that there's an object lesson about, opening up the plates and, putting on spectacles and pretending you're Joseph Smith, translating them. You got to be clear that in the Book of Mormon, as we know it, it was all done through the rock in the hat. Supposedly in the 116 lost pages, which is a whole other fiasco, he may have used something else. Who knows? But in the Book of Mormon that's printed today, it's all the rock in the hat. There's actually a nice story about the spectacles and how that myth came to be. I'll post some links in the comments for some follow-up. But let's go back to this idea that the church art doesn't matter. And the question would be, well, why use church art if it really doesn't matter, if it's not important? We use artwork because we know it matters. It's a convincing tool, especially among the less literate. So the fact that it's being used proves that it does matter. If it wasn't helpful to missionary efforts, they wouldn't use it. In Preach My Gospel, the original manual, I actually was the first generation of missionaries to use Preach My Gospel. I think they're using it today. The picture of Joseph and Oliver Cowdery with the plates in front is there. That's what we would show the missionaries. That's also in the Book of Mormon. And it was also in the artwork that we were given to show people as we're teaching them. So that's been removed. I don't know if it's in the Book of Mormon anymore that we'd give investigators. I know they removed it from Preach My Gospel. And what's interesting is they haven't replaced that artwork with Joseph Smith looking into a hat, which is the historically correct way that the entire Book of Mormon as we know it was channeled, it was brought forth. So my question is, if it doesn't matter, well, why would the church remove this artwork? That's a false narrative. And furthermore, why didn't they replace it with pictures of Joseph looking into a rock in the hat? If it didn't matter, why did they take those actions? And the obvious answer is the church knows that it does matter. It doesn't make a good narrative. And in Joseph Smith's, official church history that he was putting forth to dispel the lies of the wicked men, he glosses over the treasure digging. He makes it sound like it's this kind of, one-time thing. It was 3 years of his life looking for buried treasure with this peepstone. So if that argument doesn't convince you that, one, the church is responsible for this artwork, and two, that it does matter, you tell me what would convince you. And this is the problem we run into with religion. If people are honest, there's actually nothing that would convince them. And so they have this special pleading and they keep moving the goalpost because it's this desperate attempt to hold on to this religion, which means a lot to you. And I understand the power of religion and that tribal connection and the narratives. As humans, we find ourselves in this confusing, scary world. Part of our evolutionary instincts is to believe whatever our parents tell us in the beginning, because that helps us survive. And later we contemplate our own mortality. And there's a lot of, especially early on in human history, a lot of utility, a lot of value to religious beliefs. Now, things can be helpful, but not true. We know that with the myth of Santa Claus. It's helpful to get your kids to obey. It's not true. The teachings of Islam can be helpful in certain contexts to getting people to obey and creating order. It doesn't mean they have to be true. Anyway, just some thoughts on the artwork. I'm really tired of this popping up, this idea that it's just an artist rendition. Am I supposed to expect that the prophets and apostles need to draw it for it to be official? Again, there's this double standard where, look, if anybody else came to you today and said, hey, I channeled this book through a white hat with a peepstone, and it's this record of the ancient Mayan civilization or whatever they want to make up, you wouldn't believe them. So hopefully you enjoyed that. Bye.